from PIs who are just starting their very first R01 or even contemplating starting their very first R01 grant is this process is so overwhelming. I don't even know where to start. So that's what we're talking about today. If you're new around here, my name is Sarah Dobson. I am a research grant consultant, and my team and I help early career researchers get funded at NIH. So let's talk about getting started, or the fear of getting started with an R01 grant and what you can do about it. In my view, the best way to handle the monumental size of a grant like an R01 is to have a system in place that can help you break it down into smaller components and actually get it finished. And that is how I teach grant writing, is through a system. I call it the formula. And not only does it help you get started and sort of map everything out in a way that feels efficient and straightforward, but it also helps you come out the other end with something that is actually competitive and persuasive and clear and will resonate with your reviewers. So what does that formula or system actually look like? Well, first, we start out with strategy. In my view, there are some pretty basic things that you need to have in place before you can even pass go. And that's what the strategy component, the initial strategy component, is really about. And I'm not talking here about, how competitive your research idea actually is. That comes a little bit later. This sort of basic level of strategy is to help you avoid wasting your own time. And the reason that would happen, the reason that you would waste your own time on an application that has zero chance of getting funded, is that you're basically applying to the wrong mechanism or the wrong institute, or you, in essence, you haven't matched up your research idea with the mission and objectives of the funding opportunity or the institute that is part of that funding opportunity, right? So there are some really basic things that you need to figure out before you even get started, and that is one of them. And so once you have done that, there are some other really basic things that you need to sort out, like eligibility, right? And so once you are clear on that yes, you are applying to the right mechanism and you are eligible to apply, the scope of your project is within the scope of the funding opportunity, that's when you can say, great, now I can actually get started on this and start planning my application. And so that's when we move into the planning phase. And in the planning phase, you want to get as detailed and granular as you possibly can about the work that needs to be done and when you are going to do it based on the amount of time that you have available, right? And so this is just a basic project management plan. We call it a proposal development plan because that's what you're doing, right? You're developing your grant proposal. And so in any project management plan, you start from the endpoint and you work backwards. And so we look at, where you are now, the deadline you have in front of you, how much time you actually have in between now and the deadline in terms of, the number of hours you have available and what you actually need to be doing in those available hours, right? So it's not just about saying, I have 4 months until the deadline. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that this grant gets finished. It's getting really clear on, I have an hour on a Wednesday afternoon. What am I going to be working on during that hour on a Wednesday afternoon? And how is that going to help me advance the ball when it comes to getting the grant finished? So having a clear understanding of what those different pieces are and how they fit into your schedule, what can be done sequentially versus what can be done concurrently, all of those pieces are part of the planning phase of your grant writing system. Okay, next we have the argument phase, where you're developing your argument for why your research ought to be funded, why you have the right team in place to do the work, and why your project is feasible. And those are really the three big questions that any reviewer is going to be asking when they're reading your grant. Of course, in an R01 grant, there are specific review criteria that come alongside those three main questions, but you really have to make sure that you are presenting a clear and persuasive argument for those three big questions and all of the other scoring criteria that are part of any grant that you apply for, R01 included, R03, R21, right? Any grant has specific scoring criteria, and you need to write to those criteria. So what we're doing, or what I would be teaching you in the argument phase, is how to use rhetorical frameworks to make sure that you are writing directly to those criteria and to those big questions that reviewers are asking, and how that actually plays out in each of the different sections of your grant. So that's going to look different in your specific aims page versus in your significance section, or your innovation section, or your approach section, right? Or even your bio sketch, or your facilities documents. It really, you can use these frameworks in different ways in the different places in your application, but it all comes together cohesively to tell a strong story across all of those documents, right? That's what you're trying to accomplish. And that's what happens in that argument phase. Next, we have the feedback phase. And this one is really, really important, right? You never, ever, 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 ever want to submit a grant of this size and scope without having somebody look at it before it goes in for formal peer review, right? If the very first time anybody is looking at your grant outside of the research team, if that's the first time is when you're in formal peer review, you are in big trouble, right? You want to make sure that you have other eyes on your application before it goes to formal peer review, so you can catch anything that might be addressable before it actually goes in for peer review, right? So figuring out who those people are, you can ask for feedback, and what exactly you're asking, what is the best use of their time and expertise. These are important things to figure out, and then developing a sort of a feedback plan. That's what happens in that phase. And then the final phase is around revision and refinement, right? So how do you actually take that feedback and incorporate it into your application so that it's better? And again, we have tools to teach you how to do that, how to actually do your own internal review. So you've got other people who are reviewing the grant for you, but how do you actually sort of remove yourself from the writing and look at it from an outsider's perspective? That is one of the strongest skills you can develop as a grant writer. And we teach you a technique to be able to do that. And so those are really the 5 phases of the grant funding formula. We've got strategy, planning, argument, feedback, and revision and refinement. And what I want you to understand about those different phases is that it's not linear. You're going to be kind of bouncing back and forth across all of those phases, but just being able to understand them in the different phases can be helpful in terms of how you approach your grant writing. And so if you want some more guidance on your next R01, we have a course called the Grant Funding Formula that can help you do that. It guides you step by step through those phases of grant writing and gives you tools and worksheets and frameworks to help you get through all of those phases and produce a high quality application that is clear and persuasive and that is going to resonate with your reviewers. And so if you're interested in learning more about the grant funding formula, there's a link in the video description where you can go and read all about the course and the syllabus and the different elements of the program. This is an online self-paced program that is available anytime. So whenever you are ready to register and get started, it is available for you. And the other thing to know about the grant funding formula is that when you register, you get lifetime access to the course materials, which means that every time you write an R01 grant, you can go back and take this course again to help guide you through the process every single time. So again, the grant funding formula is designed for R01 applicants, whether you are writing for the very first time or you've run into a bit of bad luck and you need some new tools and techniques to help you write a stronger application. That is who it's designed for. However, the structure of R03s and R21s are very similar to R01 grants. And so this course will also work if you're writing an R03 or an R21. And we even have templates inside the course specifically for R03 and R21 grants. So if you want to learn more, check out the link below this video, and I will see you.